Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are looking at a giant. And I really don't use that word lightly. We are talking about a true titan of the American retail landscape that for a very, very long time just seemed absolutely invincible, untouchable.
Totally. And if you grew up in the United States, anytime between, say, the 80s and the early 2000s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You can probably picture it right now.
Oh, the imagery is iconic. It's burned into my brain.
It really is. I want you to just close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're in the passenger seat of your parents' station wagon, right? You're driving down some suburban highway. You pass a strip mall, and there it is.
The Red Tower.
That massive burgundy red tiled tower standing like a fortress at the entrance, the plug design, the sheer scale of the place. We are talking, of course, about Circuit City.
It's such a fascinating case study because for a long time, Circuit City wasn't just another store. It was the destination. You know, it was the place you went to see what the future of technology looked like.
If you wanted to see the first flat screen TV or the first DVD player or the newest camcorder, you went to the Red Tower. And yet, if you drive past those same locations today, the contrast is just haunting.
It really is.
They're either these empty shells or they've been turned into a gym or a Halloween pop-up store or some other retailer. The speed at which this company went from a Fortune 500 powerhouse to total liquidation is just startling.
And that is exactly the mission of this deep dive. We are not just here to get nostalgic about buying CDs in 1998. We really want to understand how a company that pioneered the very concept of the electronic superstore, and, spoiler alert for anyone who doesn't know this, a company that actually created the massive success that is CarMax.
Which is an amazing story in itself.
How could a company like that just completely collapse? We're talking about a company that liquidated everything in 2009. Gone. Poof.
And it's not just, it's not just a story about the economy being bad in 2008. I mean, that's the easy answer, but it's not the whole story.
Not even close.
No. When you really dig into the source material, especially the detailed corporate history and all the financial filings, you see this series of strategic missteps that they're almost Shakespearean in their nature. We're going to look at how they timed the housing market completely wrong, how they bet on the wrong tech formats, and this is maybe the most critical part, how they fundamentally misunderstood the value of their own people.
Oh, that human capital piece. When we get to it, it is going to blow your mind. It's genuinely one of the most frustrating, just baffling corporate decisions I've ever read about.
It's a textbook example of what not to do.
Exactly. But before we can get to the collapse, we have to start with the rise. Because Circuit City didn't just appear as a big box store. It actually started with a barbershop.
It did. It's a classic American origin story, but I think you have to understand the context of the era to really get why it was so revolutionary. We have to go back to 1949.
1949. Okay, so post-World War II. The baby boom is just getting started. Suburbs are being built.
Precisely. The American consumer engine is just waking up from the war. So into this world comes Samuel S. Wurtzel. He's a businessman, and he's on vacation in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
And you have to imagine this scene. He's sitting in a local barbershop, just getting a trim, a totally normal day. And while he's sitting in that chair, he witnesses something that completely changes his life. He sees the start of a television broadcast in the South.
Let's just pause on that for a second. 1949, he sees a TV. I mean, today we're so saturated with screens. They're in our pockets, on our walls, in our cars. But back then, what did that actually mean? It wasn't just, oh, cool, a TV.
No, it was basically alien technology. It was magic. You have to remember, for most people, entertainment was the radio. It was audio only.
Right, voices out of a box.
To see moving pictures.
Ugh.
In a box, in a barbershop. It was a marvel.
Yeah.
But the way people bought things back then, retail was very stiff.
Stiff how? Like you had to wear a suit and tie just to go look at a toaster?
Pretty much. You went to a department store, everything was behind a glass counter. You had to ask a clerk, usually an older gentleman in a suit, to please show you the merchandise.
It sounds so formal.
It was a very high-friction experience. It was intimidating. Wurtzel, and later his son Alan, they realized that the future wasn't, "May I help you, sir?" It was, "Look at this massive pile of cool stuff."
So he's in the barbershop, the TV turns on, most people would just say, wow, that's neat. But Wurtzel sees dollar signs.
He sees the future of consumer demand. And what's amazing to me is the speed of his reaction. He didn't just go home and write a business plan for a year. In late 1949, same year, he moved his entire family to Richmond and opened the first Ward's Company retail store.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, Ward's company was the original name. It wasn't Circuit City yet.
Correct. And for the next couple of decades, really through the 50s and 60s, Ward's company was successful, but it was still kind of exploring. They were figuring out what they wanted to be when they grew up. They were expanding into places like Albany, Mobile, D.C., and Costa Mesa, California. They even had a mail order business called Dixie Hi-Fi.
Wait, mail order hi-fi? That sounds like the Amazon of the 1960s or something.
In a way, it was. They were trying to reach the audiophiles, the real enthusiasts. They were testing all these different formats. They had smaller mall outlets called Sight and Sound. And some were even branded Circuit City, but it wasn't the superstore concept yet. It was still small scale.
Okay, so when does the Circuit City that we all remember actually come into play? When do we get that big warehouse vibe? Because that feels like such a distinct shift from a little sight and sound store in a mall.
The real game changer happens in the mid-'70s. Samuel's son, Alan Wurtzel, he becomes CEO in 1972, and Alan has a long-range plan.
Okay.
In 1975, they're building a new corporate office and distribution center on Thalbro Street in Richmond, and they have all this extra space in the facility. I mean, basically a big empty chunk of the warehouse. So they decided to open a new retail format right there. They called it Ward's Loading Dock.
Ward's loading dock. It sounds so gritty, industrial, like you need to wear a hard hat to go shopping.
And that was exactly the point. It opened in May 1975. It was a massive warehouse showroom. And consumers, they absolutely loved it.
Oh, why? I mean, why would people want to shop in a loading dock compared to a nice department store with, carpets and stuff?
It implies a lack of pretense. It was literally the loading dock of their corporate headquarters. They rolled up the bay doors. It was gritty. But that triggers something in the consumer's brain.
Oh.
It makes you feel like you're getting a deal, like you're bypassing the middleman and buying it straight off the truck.
It's the Costco effect, or like the IKEA warehouse section. If I have to go pick it off a giant metal pallet myself, I assume I'm paying less for it.
Precisely. It's that treasure hunt aspect. And because it was so wildly popular, they decided to pivot the entire company toward this model. So by 1978, they renamed this format the Circuit City Superstore, which led to the company listing on the New York Stock Exchange in 1984, and then officially changing its corporate name to Circuit City Stores, Inc.
So they ride this superstore wave right into the 80s. And this is where the branding we all know really starts to solidify. We mentioned the Red Tower earlier. That wasn't just some arbitrary design choice, was it? They didn't just have a surplus of red tiles laying around.
No, it was incredibly strategic. In 1985, they were entering the Los Angeles market. Now, you have to think about L.A. It's a car culture.
Totally.
You're driving past endless strip malls and shopping centers at 45, 50 miles per hour. If you want to stand out, you need something vertical. You need a beacon.
You need something that just pops against all that beige stucco.
Exactly. So they introduced the Red Tower entrance specifically to be identifiable to drivers in that crowded LA market. It was brilliant architectural branding. You didn't even need to read the sign. You saw the shape, you saw the color, and you knew that's what the TEs are.
It's marketing through architecture, which is so smart. And then in 1988, they evolved that look into what they called the plug design.
Right. If you look at photos from that era, the entrance literally looks like a giant electrical plug going into the building.
Yeah.
They were just doubling down on their visual brand as the place for electronics.
And along with that look, they had the slogan, "Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state-of-the-art."
And, in the 80s and 90s, that wasn't just a tagline. It was a real differentiator. You have to remember, technology back then was complicated.
Oh, yeah. It was not plug and play like it is today.
Not at all. Setting up a home theater meant dealing with all these different receiver wires, impedance, tracking on your VCR. Buying a camcorder meant understanding formats like VHS-C versus 8mm, early home computers. They were a nightmare for the average person. You couldn't just Google it.
Right, you needed a guide, a tech Sherpa to get you up the mountain.
Exactly. And Circuit City had factory-trained staff. They wore uniforms. They were professionals. Discount stores like Zodi's, which, funnily enough, Circuit City actually took over a bunch of their old locations. They didn't offer that level of expertise. You were on your own at Zodi's. At Circuit City, someone would actually explain the difference between a 2-head and a 4-head VCR.
So they are absolutely crushing it. They're expanding aggressively. They're taking over former the Akron stores, former Zodi stores. They are the big dog in the yard. But this is where it gets really interesting. In 1988, They had a chance to squash a future rival before it even really got started.
This is one of the biggest what-ifs in all of retail history. It's fascinating.
Okay, lay it on me.
In 1988, there was this smaller, growing competitor called Best Buy. They were mostly based in Minneapolis. And Circuit City had the opportunity to purchase Best Buy for just $30 million.
$40 million.
Yeah.
I need to put that in context. For a company the size of Circuit City back then, that's barely a rounding error on their balance sheet, right?
With a pocket change. It was essentially nothing.
So play devil's advocate for me. I'm Rick Sharp. I'm the Circuit City CEO at the time. I've got the money. Why on earth do I say no? Is it just pure hubris? Or was there a business case for rejecting it?
It's so easy to just say ego in hindsight. But you have to look at the metrics from 1988. Circuit City stores were generating double the sales per square foot that Best Buy's were.
Wow, okay.
Their profit margins were fatter. Their stores were cleaner, more organized. Sharp looked to Best Buy, and he saw a messy, low-margin operator with a confusing store layout. Best Buy didn't have the commission model. They were experimenting with this grab-and-go thing.
So he thought he was buying a lemon.
He thought he was buying a distraction. His logic was, why should I spend $30 million to buy a worse version of us when I can spend that same $30 million to build 10 more red towers that I know for a fact will print money? He didn't see the value in buying them. He thought he could just beat them by opening stores in their home turf of Minneapolis.
Okay, I can see the logic in the moment, but it completely ignores the concept of a defensive buy. I mean, sometimes you buy a competitor just to kill them, right? Just to take them off the board.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is the Shakespearean tragedy of it. He fundamentally underestimated Best Buy's capacity to evolve. He just assumed Best Buy would stay messy forever. He didn't foresee that Best Buy would eventually adopt the very best parts of Circuit City's inventory system, but strip away all the high labor costs. Best Buy became the lean predator, while Circuit City just stayed fat and happy.
And as we all know, that is not how history played out. Best Buy eventually became the apex predator in this whole ecosystem, but at the time, Circuit City felt untouchable. And to be fair, they were still innovating. We have to talk about one of their biggest successes, which ironically most people don't even realize, was a Circuit City creation.
CarMax.
Yes, CarMax, the used car superstore. I feel like most people know CarMax as the place you go to buy a Honda Civic without getting yelled at by a salesman, but that was a Circuit City project.
It was 100% homegrown. It was a concept developed in 1993 by Austin Ligon, who was the Senior VP of Planning, and Rick Sharp, the CEO. They looked at the used car market and just saw a disaster area.
A disaster.
I mean, think about buying a used car in the early 90s. It was the used car salesman's stereotype in the plaid suits. It was fragmented. You had no idea if the odometer had been rolled back. You had to haggle for 3 hours. It was just a painful, untrustworthy experience.
So they thought, what if we treat cars like we treat TVs?
Exactly that. They thought, what if we apply the big box electronics model to cars? No haggle pricing, a massive selection. We're talking 400 plus cars at a single location. A professional, clean, consumer-friendly experience where the price on the sticker is the price you actually pay.
It seems so obvious now, but back then, buying a used car was like entering a battle zone. Circuit City brought corporate standardization to the Wild West.
And it was a grand slam. They opened the first one in Richmond in '93. It grew slowly at first, but then they took it public as something called a tracking stock in 1997.
Hold on, I want to double click on that, a tracking stock. We hear these finance terms thrown around, but what did that actually mean for a regular Circuit City shareholder?
It's a little bit of financial gymnastics. So essentially, Circuit City said, we have this amazing car business inside our company, but the market is confused. Are we an electronics store or are we a car lot? So they created a specific stock ticker just for the performance of CarMax, even though Circuit City still owned the whole thing. It allowed investors to bet on the car business completely separately from the stereo business.
So they were trying to unlock the value. They wanted the market to see CarMax as this huge growth engine, not just some used car lot attached to a speaker store.
Exactly right. And it worked almost too well. The child started outgrowing the parent. So eventually, in 2002, Circuit City spun it off completely. Shareholders got stock valued at over $1.2 billion.
That is just incredible. A consumer electronics store incubates a used car dealership that becomes worth billions of dollars.
It is so rare for a retailer to internally incubate a business that becomes as successful, if not more so, than the parent company itself. It really showed that Circuit City did have vision. They did have innovation deep in their DNA.
But for every CarMax, there is a DIVX.
DIVX, the strikeout, the dark side of innovation.
This is one of those technologies that, if you weren't there at the time, it just sounds like a fever dream. Explain what DIVX was and why on earth Circuit City bet so heavily on it.
So this was 1997. The DVD format is just emerging. It's the new hot thing. Circuit City, however, decided to back an alternative called DIVX.
Was it like a different shape of disc or something?
No, it looked just like a DVD.
Mhm.
But the business model was radically different. The concept was you would buy a disc for a really low price, say $5. But, and this is a huge but, you could only watch it for 48 hours after you first hit play.
Wait, so it's like a rental, but you own the physical disc.
Correct. But here's the real kicker. The player had to be connected to a phone line. To watch the movie, the player would literally dial out to a central server to authorize the viewing. If you wanted to watch it again after the 48 hours were up, you had to pay a continuation fee.
Okay, I can already see why consumers hated this. It feels like Big Brother's in your living room monitoring your movie habits. Plus, you have to keep a phone line plugged into your DVD player. That's just annoying.
It was incredibly annoying. But you have to ask yourself, why did the executives think this was a good idea? These aren't stupid people. What was the pitch in the boardroom?
I'm gonna guess it was about recurring revenue.
Bingo. The whole pitch was subscription revenue. Think about it. When you sell a standard DVD, you get paid once. $20, done. But with DIVX, you sell the disc for $5 as a loss leader, and then you charge them $3 every single time they want to watch it again later. It was the Netflix model before streaming existed, but tethered to physical hardware.
It was a subscription model implemented via hardware.
Yes. But they completely ignored the psychology of ownership, the first sale doctrine. People want to own things. The idea that you had to ask your DVD player for permission to watch a movie you were physically holding in your hand, it just felt dystopian.
Please, HAL, open the pod bay door so I can watch The Matrix again.
Laughs. Exactly. And remember, this wasn't just a product failure. It was a PR disaster. Internet forums were just becoming a thing in the late 90s. And the tech nerds, Circuit City's core demographic, they organized boycotts. They viewed DIVX as anti-consumer evil.
Wow.
Circuit City pushed it hard, but it was a total disaster. They discontinued it in 1999 and took a $114 million loss.
That is a lot of money to just set on fire. So you have CarMax, which is brilliant, and DIVX, which is a catastrophe. It shows a company that's swinging for the fences, but maybe losing its focus on the core business.
And that loss of focus becomes painfully apparent as we move into the 2000s. This is where the tide really begins to turn. We start seeing these strategic decisions that, in hindsight, are just baffling.
Let's talk about the year 2000. This is what's known as the appliance blunder.
This is such a critical pivot point. In July of 2000, Circuit City made the decision to abandon the large appliance business in all of their stores. So we're talking refrigerators, washers, dryers, gone.
Was this just a small part of their business? I mean, if I'm selling 90% stereos and 10% fridges, maybe it makes sense to drop the fridges to focus?
Not at all. That is what makes it so shocking. In 1999, Circuit City was the #2 appliance retailer in the entire United States. They were second only to Sears. They had nearly $1.6 billion in revenue coming just from that sector.
So they walked away from $1.6 billion in revenue. Why? Who walks away from $1 billion?
The rationale was a mix of fear and cost cutting. The executives were worried about competition from Home Depot and Lowe's. Those home improvement stores were getting really aggressive in appliances. So Circuit City leadership thought, we can't compete with Home Depot on fridges. They also thought they could save a fortune on warehousing and delivery costs if they just stopped selling these big, heavy metal boxes. They wanted to use that floor space for consumer electronics, PlayStations, PCs, software.
Okay, I can almost see the logic in a boardroom. Let's focus on the high-tech, high-margin stuff. Let the hardware stores handle the fridges. But the timing.
The timing was catastrophic. I mean, think about what happened in the U.S. economy right after the year 2000.
The housing boom.
The massive residential housing boom. Everybody was buying houses, flipping houses, renovating kitchens.
And what does every single renovated kitchen need? A new stainless steel fridge.
Exactly. The mid-2000s saw this dramatic rise in new appliance sales. And by exiting that market in 2000, Circuit City completely missed the boat. They walked away right before the party started. They essentially just handed all that market share to Best Buy, Lowe's, and Home Depot on a silver platter.
And to make it even worse, the cost of the transition itself was enormous. It wasn't free to just stop selling fridges.
No. They had to retrofit every single superstore. They had to rip out the plumbing and the heavy-duty shelving for appliances and install new shelving for games and computers. That retrofit alone cost the company $1.5 billion.
Wait a minute, let me get this straight. They walked away from a $1.6 billion revenue stream, and they paid $1.5 billion to do it.
Essentially, yes. They spent $1.5 billion to stop selling the very products that were about to see a massive surge in demand.
Mm-hmm.
And the new products they focused on, games, CDs, movies, those were all low margin.
Right. There's not a lot of profit in a CD compared to a brand new washing machine.
Exactly. And those smaller items were also increasingly moving to digital or to other big box competitors like Walmart. You don't need expert advice to buy a Britney Spears CD, you just buy it wherever it's cheapest. But you do need advice to buy a washer and dryer set. They gave up their advantage.
That is just painful to hear. And it wasn't just the product mix, right? Their real estate was starting to become a problem, too.
It was. By the early 2000s, those iconic Red Tower stores were getting old. They were often these older shopping centers built in the 70s and 80s. Those centers were losing foot traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Best Buy was building shiny new stores in the newer power centers, closer to where the population was moving. Circuit City tried to adapt. They introduced new store formats called Horizon and Tide.
Tide, like the laundry detergent. Or the ocean.
Like the Ocean Tide. Yeah, the Horizon format in 2000 and Tide in 2001 were these attempts to modernize. They removed the old racetrack layout, they lowered the sight lines, and sadly, they eliminated the red tower entrances in favor of a central one. They were trying to look more like a self-service big box store.
So they were basically trying to copy Best Buy.
They were trying to look like them, yes.
Yeah.
They even did this internal research that found that women and teenagers felt disrespected by the Circuit City sales staff. So the Tide format was designed to be friendlier and more open.
You know, that research point is really interesting, disrespected by sales staff, because that leads us directly into what I think is the darkest chapter of this whole story. Section 5, the human capital crisis.
This is the heart of the collapse. This is where the tragedy really sets in. We talked about state-of-the-art service. Well, that relied on experienced, knowledgeable people. But starting in 2003, Circuit City began to view those people not as assets to be cultivated, but as liabilities to be cut.
So what exactly did they do?
In 2003, they eliminated commission sales in all stores overnight. They laid off 3,900 experienced salespeople who were making good money on commission, and they replaced them with hourly product specialists.
So you take the people who know the most, who are the most motivated to sell because their paycheck literally depends on it, and you just show them the door.
All to save money.
Yeah.
They estimated it would save about $130 million a year. But company insiders later identified this as the single most influential decision that led to the company's demise. You traded expert service for cheaper labor. But it gets worse.
2007.
2007. This is the wage management layoffs.
Yeah.
And the details of this are they're difficult to comprehend from a morale standpoint.
Walk us through it, because this sounds like something out of a dystopian novel.
So in March 2007, Circuit City announced they were firing 3,400 better-paid associates. These were people working on the floor. But here's the kicker. They weren't fired for doing a bad job. They weren't fired for being late. They were fired because they were too good at their jobs.
Wait, explain that. How can you possibly be fired for being too good?
Because they had been there a long time.
Yeah.
They had earned their annual raises. They had hit the pay cap for their position. The corporate algorithm just looked at the payroll and said, this person costs $15 an hour. I can replace them with a kid who costs $8 an hour.
That is the most spreadsheet-brained decision I have ever heard in my life.
It's the McNamara fallacy. Making decisions based solely on quantitative metrics like wage cost and completely ignoring the qualitative ones like trust, expertise, and loyalty. They calculated the savings perfectly. What they couldn't calculate, because it doesn't fit in a spreadsheet, was the cost of losing all that knowledge.
And the insult to injury was the offer they made to these people, right?
Oh, yes. These laid-off workers were told they could be rehired after 10 weeks at the new lower market rate. The starting wage should drop from roughly $8.75 to $7.40 an hour.
You're fired, but hey, come back in 2.5 months and we'll pay you less to do the exact same job. That is... I mean, who thought that was a good idea? That's just humiliating.
It was a disastrous miscalculation of human psychology. The Washington Post reported on this at the time, and it backfired immediately.
Yeah.
Obviously, the fired people didn't come back. They went to Best Buy or somewhere else that valued them. But think about the people who weren't fired.
The survivors.
Exactly. If you're a survivor, What's your incentive to work hard?
Yeah.
If you work hard and get a raise, you might be the next one on the chopping block for earning too much.
So everyone just stops trying.
Morale completely collapsed.
Yeah.
And customers noticed it immediately. Imagine being a customer the next day. You walk in to buy a $3,000 home theater system.
Yeah.
You want to talk to Dave, the guy who helped you last time, who knows everything. Where's Dave?
Dave is gone. And in his place is a 19-year-old making minimum wage who is just reading the tag off the shelf to you.
I can read the tag myself.
Exactly. Circuit City destroyed their entire value proposition. Why would you pay Circuit City prices for Walmart-level service? The moment they fired their experts, they became just a more expensive version of a discount store. They cut out their own heart to lose a few pounds.
And that leads us to the inevitable end, the death spiral.
So now we have a company with no appliances, bad real estate, and a demoralized, inexperienced workforce. We are entering 2008 and 2009.
The collapse. And the warning signs are just everywhere. CEO turnover. Phil Schoonover resigned in September 2008. The stock was tanking. And then there was this bizarre incident in August 2008 involving Mad Magazine.
Mad Magazine? What did Alfred E. Neumann have to do with Circuit City?
Mad Magazine ran a parody piece calling the store Sucker City. It poked fun at how they had so many locations right next to Best Buy's and how the service had declined. It was a cartoon.
Right, it's Mad Magazine. They make fun of everyone. That's their whole thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But corporate leadership at Circuit City was so thin-skinned, so panic-stricken, that they ordered all the stores to destroy the issue. They literally ordered employees to rip the magazines off the racks and throw them in the trash.
They ordered the destruction of a comic magazine. That just screams panic. That is a company that has completely lost its grip on reality.
It screams a company that knows the criticism is true. And financially, the walls were closing in. In early 2008, Blockbuster, of all companies, made a bid to buy Circuit City for $1 billion.
Blockbuster trying to buy Circuit City. It's like watching two people who are drowning try to hold on to each other to stay afloat.
It really is. It was a desperate move by Blockbuster to get into retail and a desperate move by Circuit City to find any savior. But even Blockbuster withdrew the offer in July 2008 because of market conditions. They basically looked at the books and ran away screaming.
And then November 2008.
November 10th, 2008. Circuit City filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection.
Okay, let's explain that term for a second. Chapter 11 usually isn't the end, right? I mean, airlines file for Chapter 11 all the time and they keep flying.
Right. Chapter 11 is a reorganization. It's a timeout. You go to a judge and you say, look, we have too much debt. Protect us from our creditors while we close some stores, fix our operations, and come up with a plan to be profitable again. The goal is to emerge as a leaner, healthier company.
So why didn't that happen here? Why couldn't they fix it?
They just ran out of time and trust. This was late 2008. The global financial crisis was in full swing, credit was completely frozen, and Circuit City owed massive amounts of money, $119 million to HP, $116 million to Samsung.
And if you're Samsung and Circuit City already owes you over $100 million, are you going to send them more TVs on credit?
Absolutely not. Cut them off. The vendors were scared to ship any new merchandise because they didn't think they'd get paid. So the shelves went empty.
Yeah.
And if you have no product, you have no sales. It's a death spiral.
They tried to find a buyer, though, right?
They did. There was some interest from a Mexican retail tycoon, Ricardo Salinas Pliego, and a few others. But the numbers just didn't work. The hole was just too deep to climb out of.
So, on January 16th, 2009...
They announced the end. They converted from Chapter 11 reorganization to Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
And Chapter 7 means?
Liquidation. It means game over.
Yeah.
We aren't fixing the company. We are selling off the parts. The fixtures, the inventory, the real estate, everything must go. 30,000 employees lost their jobs immediately.
And it wasn't just the Circuit City employees, was it?
No. You have to remember they had partnered with Verizon Wireless to run the mobile shop inside the stores. 45% of Verizon's entire sales force worked inside Circuit City locations. They were all laid off, too. It just rippled through the economy.
That is massive. The final day was March 8th, 2009.
Yeah. I remember driving past the store that week. The signs were already being torn down, and if you went to their website, it was just replaced with this simple, stark message. Circuit City would like to thank all of the customers who have shopped with us over the past 60 years. Unfortunately, we announced on January 16th, 2009 that we are going out of business.
60 years. From a vision in a barbershop to a liquidation sale. Just gone. But the name didn't completely disappear, did it? This is the weird afterlife of the brand.
In the modern corporate world, brands rarely die. They just become zombies. the intellectual property, the name, the logo, the customer list, that still has value. In May 2009, a company called Systemax bought the brand, the trademarks, and the website for just $14 million.
14 million. That is less than half of what they could have bought Best Buy for back in the 80s.
The irony is just inescapable. And Systemax already owned CompUSA and Tiger Direct. So for a few years, from 2009 to 2012, CircuitCity.com was basically just a clone of those other sites. It was the skin you were buying from Tiger Direct, but the banner said Circuit City.
But then it tried to come back again.
It keeps trying to come back. In 2016, a retail veteran named Ronny Shmoel acquired the brand. And there have been various announcements since then. Kiosks, store-within-a-store concepts, a Powered by Circuit City initiative that was announced in 2023. But for the average consumer, the Circuit City we all knew, the Red Tower, the warehouse showroom, that's history. It's a ghost.
Okay, let's unpack all this. We've gone from the barbershop in 1949 all the way to the liquidation in 2009. It has been a roller coaster. What are the big takeaways here? What do we learn from the fall of the Red Tower?
I think there are three really critical lessons that apply to almost any business. First, the danger of looking backward. Circuit City was so obsessed with cost-cutting on their legacy business, the appliances, that they completely missed the housing boom. They were fighting the last war. They were worried about Home Depot when they should have been worried about relevance.
Second has to be the human capital. I just can't shake that story about the layoffs. You cannot fire your experts and expect to maintain an expert brand.
Absolutely. You cannot strip mine your own culture to save a few dollars on the balance sheet. They treated their best employees as expenses to be cut, rather than assets to be invested in. And the customers felt that immediately. The moment that trust is gone, the brand is just a logo on a building.
And the third?
The failure to adapt to media and openness. They bet on a proprietary, restrictive format like DIVX instead of embracing the open standard of DVD. They tried to control the consumer rather than serving the consumer. They tried to lock people in, and people hate being locked in.
It's a tragedy of errors, but here's where it gets really interesting to think about the alternative timeline. And this is the thought I want to leave our listeners with.
It's a CarMax question.
Exactly. Circuit City had the internal initiation to create CarMax. CarMax is a company that is still around, it's still thriving, it's worth billions of dollars. They had the future inside their own building.
They did. They incubated their own replacement. So the question is, if Circuit City leadership had simply recognized that their future was in their innovation, in the CarMax model, rather than in their legacy electronics stores, would the name Circuit City still be a ticker symbol on the NYSE today?
Did they just cling to the store concept for too long when they had already invented the next big thing?
It's possible. Or maybe, just maybe, every retail giant eventually runs out of space to grow. Maybe the Red Tower was destined to fall so that something else could rise in its place.
Like a Spirit Halloween store.
Laughs like a Spirit Halloween store.
On that spooky note, that's it for this deep dive into the rise and fall of Circuit City. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.